Hey friends, how you doing there? I would like to show you how to install this fibre cement sheeting in Australia. Where I became a carpenter, we call it fibro, but it's basically called cement sheet. It gets manufactured in all sorts of different countries, and it's a really versatile, durable product. It doesn't rust, it doesn't rot, and it is a little bit brittle. That's its downside, that it's brittle, but it can last a long time if it's looked after. And in this case, we're spacing the studs on our wall quite close together. We've got two studs in the middle of a 1200 millimeter sheet, so that leaves it at 400 millimeter spacings, which leaves only about 350 millimeters in between the studs on the sheet. That's quite strong, quite durable, especially with the middle row of nogs there. Now this sheet is 6 millimeters thick. You can also get different types of cement sheet. Some of it is called blue board. It has a blue face to it, or a blue color, and that comes in 7.5 millimeters thick, and sometimes thicker, even 9 millimeters thick. And then there's some other boards that are also quite thick, 9 or 10 millimeters thick for commercial applications. But for residential, simple buildings, this 6 millimeter fibro is quite ideal. And the 7.5 and 9 millimeter blue boards are also really good products, because they're even thicker and stronger and more durable. Some of them have a recessed edge on the edge there, and that recessed edge allows you basically to run tape in there and then to fill it, and like you would maybe with plasterboard on the inside of a house, to fill it and then to basically make it look like it's been rendered, so that it's just a completely smooth finish. But in this case, we're going as simple and as cheap as we can, and we're using the square edge 6 millimeter fibro as cladding. And if you have a look at our edges here, they're quite tight, so we'll just butt them together tightly. Another option for those joins is to put in a plastic joiner strip, and those joiner strips basically allow you to slide the sheets into the joiner strip from either side. That's a pretty clean sort of a look as well once you paint that. But don't be afraid to just butt them up and paint that then again as well. I feel personally that once the paint goes into that crack and fills it up, that's quite weatherproof. Now what we want to do with these sheets is to install them on the wall vertically, not horizontally like this with a horizontal join, because that leaves a little bit more of an opportunity for water to come and maybe suck into that crack. And it also, in most cases, is easier to make your stud spacings line up with the vertical join. So we want to grab the sheet like this vertically, and we want to install it on the wall vertically like that. And we're basically working around our window and our door frame cuts. Okay, so let's talk about the joins in your fibre cement sheets. The old traditional variety of joining these was with these plastic joiner strips, and you can see there it's got a slot for the fibro on one side and a slot on the other side, and you need to get the right size for your fibre cement sheet. So this one is 6 millimeter joiner, plastic joiner strip. And the advantage of these joiner strips obviously is that that it's going into a slot there, and once you paint it and the paint sort of works its way into the crack, it's fairly waterproof, because any water getting in there sort of runs down that joiner strip. You should have some sort of a wall wrap on your wall anyway, some sort of insulation wrap or foil wrap. But this is how the plastic joiner strips work. They're very fiddly. You're going to end up fighting the sheets, especially long sheets, getting the joiner strip to go in all the way up a 2.4 meter sheet and then all the way down it. So it can be very fiddly and you can be fighting the sheets, but it's a good option, and it's fairly neat. It's seen to be old style these days, but I think it's a neat option. So you get the joiner strip on one side, and then ideally with your wall stud here, you want the joiner strip not to be in the middle, sort of between studs there, because then you've got this big gap and the join is sort of flapping in the breeze in between studs. So what we really want to do here is that we want to get that joiner strip close to the stud, either just right off the stud and then join the next fibro piece into it, and then you can nail that fibro piece into your stud, and the joiner strip is just offset to the side of the stud holding the other sheet. Now ideally, I think if both sheets are supported on the stud like you would with a butt join, that's even better. But it is, if you position these two sheets so that they're centered on the stud and the joiner strip is in the middle of this stud, then the issue you come up with is that you have very little space for nailing
and you have to nail both sheets instead of just one. Now you can do that. I think that's one of the best options, is to put that joiner strip right in the middle of the stud where you're putting the join. Normally you would have a stud behind some wood, something solid behind that join, but then you've just got to angle your nails carefully into the stud on both sides so you don't miss the wood. And another option is to basically put that joiner strip coming right to the edge of the stud, something like that. So the joiner strip sort of flush with the stud on that side, and then this one piece of cement sheet is getting into the joiner strip, and it's got, you know, maybe, I don't know, it goes in there 7 or 8 millimeters, so it's got almost 10 millimeters on the stud. And then you can nail just on this one side of the sheet into the stud and leave the other one. So it's just one neat nail row like that. So that's the plastic joiner strips. They're quite practical. You usually use them vertically. Obviously, you want to stand your sheets up vertically. That's probably the best position. But if you are cladding a wall, like maybe an end gable wall that is higher than the 2.4 meter sheet, then you can use these strips also horizontally. You just want to make sure there's not a lot of water getting to it, or seal it somehow, put some sort of sealant in there, or a bit of flashing. So that can be a little bit more complicated, but it basically weather seals fairly good if you put a good bunch of coats of paint onto it and the paint sucks into there. I don't think the water's going to get in there very much. Okay, so that's the plastic joiner strip. The option which I've used on this house, which is much simpler, is basically just a butt join. So this is a simple butt join. You're just butting up the sheets basically to each other. The edges of the sheets, the factory edges, are almost always completely straight, so those butt joins do join fairly well. You can end up with this tiny sort of a crack here, and that can be noticeable, but you can deal with that crack, fill it with lots of paint or sand it and put a little bit of filler in that. I mean, that's a bit fiddly, no one's going to bother too much with that. But if you butt join these sheets, another option for external wall lining or cladding is to even paint over that with a texture paint. And if you get a really thick texture paint, and you can even make your own texture paint by putting basically some PVA glue into some paint and then adding some fine sand. You can make your own texture paint. I've done that, and that works. Yeah, if you get a good texture paint and put a couple of coats on it, then that join will actually fade away, will melt away underneath the texture paint, and so will the heads of the nails. So it will look basically like a rendered brick or block, or look like a texture coated sheet. So you can do that as well. But your basic options there are the plastic joiner strip or a butt join, and the butt join is nice and simple. You've still got options with that. And the other option, third option, apart from those two, is to put a cover strip over the top of this join. So a cover strip is basically a piece of wood that covers over the join, and that's just a rough piece of wood, but you would use something like a 30 by 11, 42 by 11, even 60 by 11, or even by 18 mil thick. So you know, whatever you want. You want that cover strip to be more of a flat piece of timber, nice and even, and then that gets nailed over the top of the join, and that it supposedly keeps the weather out. I'm not really keen on the cover strip idea, because I've seen time and time again on external walls that timber to cover things gets hammered and battered by the rain and the sun, especially the sun, and anything you paint it with usually blisters off, and it's the first thing to fall apart on the house, and it looks awful. I'm not really into cover strips so much. It is a nice look. It's sort of like the European cottage look. So it can be a good option. Make sure those cover strips are treated wood. It's something that's going to last in the weather, and it's really well painted. Usually a lighter color is better, darker painted colors. But here's another idea which I've just thought of, and you don't really see this, but to get another piece of fiber cement sheet that's basically been cut down to a width that would suit making a cover strip out of fiber cement sheet, and then you could nail that strip of fiber cement sheet, nail that all along, and that fiber cement would last a lot longer than wood for a cover strip, It's quite thin, it's only 6mm thin, you could nail it, and maybe you give it a nice beveled edge with your diamond blade grinder, and a fibre cement cover strip I think would be a bit more durable, longer lasting, so that's another option to think about as well. So that's 3 options for your joins with the fibre cement sheeting, and I'm going to talk about corners for a minute as well. What we've done for corners here is that we've cut ourselves custom wooden corners, and I did just complain about wood on the cover strips, but these wooden corners are a good idea because the corners get bashed around a lot, and the wood is somewhat, you know, forgiving and can be filled and repainted, and so yeah, and it's a bit thicker than other options. So I'm going to show you how we did that. We basically got a piece of 2x2, which is 50 by 50 millimeters, and we cut out a cutout there out of the middle of it, and we left ourselves about somewhere between 12 and 15 millimeters of a corner there, and that basically leaves us with a corner to put on there. We dress it up nicely with a planer, and we're going to fill that, and that for me is quite solid. That makes for a really good cover strip. So that's what it looks like from the bottom up. And so that's going to get painted with the rest of the house. Another type of cover strip that you could use is these plastic cover strips, these plastic corners, and that can go basically straight on there like that. So that corner can go on like that. You can put a plastic corner on like that. And if you're putting a plastic corner on there, you're basically going to want to put a bunch of glue there in the middle of it, and glue it with some sort of a polyurethane, a high-tack type of glue or adhesive, and you know, Sikaflex or something like that, and hold it there basically by glue. You can nail them there as well. It's a bit tacky, but you could nail it there with some smaller, thinner nails, and then just paint over the plastic. I think that's a good option if you don't have anything else. It goes pretty quickly. Pretty good option. You can see how both those sheets fit into the strip, and I think that's pretty clean look. I like that butted up look as well, but I think that's a pretty good look. Here on the outside we have got basically a plastic corner piece, plastic corner cover, and yeah, that goes well with these plastic joiners. They're probably considered a little bit outdated, these plastic joiner strips, but I think that's quite a clean good look still. Okay, so that is joins and corners on your fibre cement sheet. So let's have a look right here how to install this last sheet on the full sheet on this wall. Okay, so I have here a situation where I have one sheet, last sheet that was installed, and I want to butt into this sheet with a long vertical join, and then I want to come up to this window and cut around this window. The width of my sheet, 1200 millimeters, goes from here all the way through to the center of basically a block or another stud that I put here. This is quite a wide 4x2 that I put here, so that I've got a lot of meat, 50 mil on either side. You could just use whatever the framing is. This frame is a little bit small, it's 3x2. Framing on its side, basically so that a sheet comes into the middle of that piece of wood, and then the other sheet that joins into it is on that same piece of wood, which gives the join a nice even look, and it's not irregular. And that's going to be, you know, really what you want. Up the top here, you can see we've also got blocks at the top of the sheet at 2.4 meters running all the way along, so that the sheet is fully supported on all edges, the top, the sides, edges. Now on the bottom, and this is where we want to start with when we're installing this sheet, I'm going to grab a level from back here, that yellow one. Thank you, Joseph. What we need to do to start off with is to get a level and level across from the bottom of the last sheet where it's going to come to on the foundation slab below the bottom plate.
And so I'm leveling across. We have a 15 millimeter drip line in this case, which is roughly 1/2 inch. And once you level across and put your line there, come and have a look at this line that we've got down here. This line is my drip line, and the bottom of the sheet wants to come below the bottom plate to that drip line, which allows weather to hit that sheet, go down and not come up into the house. And it's just, yeah, that's basically a bit of weatherproofing. We're not coming down too far on the slab because we want this space on the slab, this 3 or 4 inches, exposed for a visual barrier so you can see if termites are trying to get in there or if anything's ingressing into the house. So that's what you want there. Now, that's our first point of reference, is that line. And using that line, I'm going to take measurements and transpose them onto the sheet so I can cut around this window frame. I'm basically going to have a small cut there of this window frame coming out of the side of the sheet, and then we're going to nail it on. So I'm going to take my measurement from that line, putting the bottom of my tape right on the bottom of that 50mm drip line where the bottom of the sheet should be coming. And I'm going to measure up underneath my window, and I'm going to leave 3 to 5 millimeters. So a small gap that looks about that much, a small gap which is easily filled with some sort of filler or sealant. And I'm going to leave that gap there. I'm not going to put it in really tight because having a flexible gap there that you can seal is really, for me, that's the best option. So I've got a measurement there, and I'm going to transpose that over here to this point. Alright, I know that's only coming in a little bit. So that's that bottom measurement. Then I'm going to take another measurement from the top. And one way to do this top measurement is basically to put the tape over the top of the window, take the tape down to that line, and then add that little gap at the top of the window. Okay? So I'm going to do that here as well. I've got that measurement. I've added another 5 millimeters to the top of that window for my gap. And I'm going to take that measurement up here, and I'm putting that measurement on there at that point where I need it. And if I've got a square, I can square across. So that's the top and bottom measurement of the window cutout. And then the last measurement is the measurement between the last sheet and the window, which is the measurement from that edge through to there. And so I'm taking that measurement on the bottom, taking 5 millimeters off that, and measuring it there and marking it off. Then another measurement at the top of the window with my 5 millimeters off, taking it through to that point and then marking that off. I did do this beforehand, so it's a little bit quicker. Then we're going to take our level or straight edge and we're going to draw that line there. Using my knee here to hold it on the bottom line. Draw that line through. Oopsies, come up the line. Come on, hold it on. Okay, so that's my line through. And these other lines I'm also drawing through. And then we're going to grind that out and we're going to install it and see how she fits. Alright, let's have a look. Where are you, Joseph? I'm not going to cut into your fingers, am I? Okay, stay away from that other side. Come and have a look. Better get a dust mask on, this is very dusty. Okay, let's try that again. You don't want to get this stuff in your lungs, it's as bad as cement dust. I take my chisel and I give this edge a bit of a scrape to clean it up, so it's a bit cleaner. Okay, now we're ready to install it. And what we're doing here is we're marking our studs off. We're marking these studs off so that we know where to nail up those studs, and we'll be able to see them at the top. So I'm going to ask Joseph to come in. My trusted helper. The nails that we're using for this installation are flathead nails. So they've got a nice thin flat head on it that holds the sheet, because the sheet's quite soft. And these ones are 40 millimeters long, so they're not quite 2 inches long. So it's like, I don't know, 1 3/4 inches. I think 30 millimeter nails are a little bit short. 35s may be okay. I think these 40s are just about the right length to go through. And as you can see, these nails are probably only going through that about 35 millimeters, you know, by the time you take the 6 mil off. Now these walls, we don't have any insulation or wall wrap on them. That's a really good idea. The Western world would require that as a part of building code, to have some sort of insulation wrap that's got foil on the inside, which basically creates a little bit of insulation there. Don't consider that to be weatherproofing. It should actually have holes in it to allow moisture in the frame to escape, so that there's no rotting happening there. Okay, so let's install this sheet. Hopefully it fits good. All right, let's have a look, Joseph. Pick it up from your side. We'll bring it over the top of the window there. Okay, now it's sitting on the top of the window there, but we're going to have to pull it up a little bit to create that 5 millimeter gap there. And the most important thing we want to do is line up with our drip line at the bottom. So let's see how we can manage that while getting a nice tight joint over this other side. Okay, so Joseph, I might get you to get ready with a nail. Get ready to put a nail up here somewhere. I'll lift it up to where we think we need to have it. Hold it up the top there. I'll lift it up and I'll get you to nail it. Make sure it's nice and tight. Okay, let's have a look. Now we're close on our drip line. We need to go up a little, I think. Okay, Joseph, I think that's it there. Does it have a gap at the top of the window? Does it look like you got a good gap there? Yeah, that's it. Put a nail in. Make sure you're tight. Is it tight there, Joseph? How's it? That is the trickiest part, is getting that first nail in with having it line up with exactly where you want it. We do have a nice tight join there. We've got a fairly decent even gap there. Bit of a gap, big gap at the bottom there. Are we on our 15 mil there? It's pretty close. Within 1 or 2 millimeters is always very acceptable. Very good. Okay, so let's nail this off. We've got the sheet on here. So I put a couple nails either side. The one thing you want to look out for mostly is that this join is nice and tight. Come and have a look at this join. If that join is really tight there, you can't see a full millimeter gap. It just looks like maybe 1/2 mil at most. It'll fill up with paint, and that'll be a really good join. So that's great. That's just what we want. I would recommend nailing this probably every 100 millimeters, every 4 inches on the bottom plate, along the bottom plate of the frame. So about every that much. Because in our case, this is going to act like bracing in the building. It's going to brace the building up a bit. We're going to have extra plot bracing. And as you go up the studs, probably 100 millimeters on the joints is a good idea as well. But as you come up these studs, probably every, I'd say 150 millimeters to 250 millimeters would be enough. So that's about, about the spacing of a nice white hand width, something like that, through the middles, and we'll nail this off. Now to mark off these sheets for where to put your nails in the middle studs, the nails on the joins of the edges should be fairly obvious. We have here marks that we put down on the slab, and I'm going to take my level, and if we've put our frame in with plumb studs, we're going to plumb that up, and it should be pretty close and accurate on where the middle of the stud is. Up the top there I can actually see the center of the stud, so I know exactly where I'm going. And that's the same there. This one has a double stud because it's a wall join. Marking it off. And we can nail that off. That's another one. This does not have a regular 2 studs in the middle because there's a wall join there, and well, that's not a wall join, it's some sort of a stud pack, but there's a wall join here. So if the studs are irregular, mark all of your studs and try and get a few nails into every stud so that the sheet is nice and firm. Okay. So one example of that is that usually you have a stud right on the joint and another stud about there and a stud there, but in this case we have double studs there and there. And through this join here, what I'm going to do to nail off is I know that I have a stud there and about 2/3 of a stud there. So I'm going to nail at this join on this one stud. I'm going to nail on the stud close to the join to bring that join close in, but then I'm also going to nail out on the other stud. So a nail offset like that. A nail in on that little bit of stud and a nail back out on the stud a little bit further off the join, so that every stud close to the join gets a nail in. Down the bottom there's actually, it's got some cyclone strapping there, some strapping to hold the roof down for cyclone, so sometimes hard to nail through the strap, but if you give the nail a good whack it sometimes pushes through the strap just fine. So nailing up through all of these studs every 200 to 300 millimeters. Nails right next to the stud, I'm nailing a bit further apart. Now I want you to come close and see how far we drive these nails in. When we're putting a nail in, we want the nail to go fairly straight. We don't want it at an angle, and we want to make sure that there's a firm stud behind it. And then we drive the nail in, come nice and close here, and we don't want that nail to go so far in that it breaks the surface of the sheet, because that's weakening the hole it has on the sheet. But we also don't want the nail to stick out so far that it's really ugly when it comes to paint it. So that's quite ugly, it's just sticking out too far. So we want to whack that so it's fairly flat, but we don't want to go so far that it breaks the surface. That's roughly perfect there. That's a little bit far, but that's a good nailing. So that's the kind of nailing we want with these flat heads. A nice smooth flat finish, but you'd be surprised once you give it a good lick of paint that the nails sort of disappear and people don't notice it so much and don't care that much. If you're really finicky, obviously you can drive the nails very far in and then fill them up, but that's not good for the sheet. You need to hold there nice and strong, especially if it's only 6 millimeters. Okay, we're almost done nailing off. Need a lever to get up to the last top part. Now that's why these blocks come in handy, to get that edge of the sheet. I want to make sure all those edges are really well supported and are not flapping in the breeze whatsoever, in case anything comes to crack them or damage them. Try to nail off something. Alright, that'll have to do for now. Now over the top here, we're going to put another piece of fibro, filling in right up to that top plate there. I'm going to leave the block in between the rafters alone. And because that horizontal join there is so far up, with so much roof over the top of it, it's not really in danger of getting a lot of weather onto it for weather getting in. But I personally feel that this is a really good, simple solution, and these vertical joints here, once they're filled with paint, or even if they have a little bit of a crack filled with a bit of gap filler smoothly and then painted over, I think that's a really good solid look, a good finish, quite weatherproof, and just generally a good option all around. So that's how we install a fiber cement sheet. We're going to then infill over the top of the window, from the top of the window right up to the top plate, and from the bottom of the window all the way down to the bottom plate again. There'll be an infill there. Of course, there's different ways of doing this. You could bring sheets only to the edge of the window and then infill that full width in between the window. That's what we've done here. This sheet started here on this edge, but the other sheet came in and cut around the window. Now we'll have an infill around the bottom of it. This window in particular is about 1 meter wide, and it's made to take a 915 millimeter wide glass louver blade. So that window frame was made especially to take louvers, because here in the tropics we don't have a lot of sliding aluminium windows, because you need the window to be able to be fully open to get the breeze through. It's just stifling here in the tropics, can you tell? I wanted you to see what it's like to cut with the guillotine here. Come around this other side. What you want to do with the guillotine is have it completely open. It's got a big tooth in there. Is open it wide up, then slide it in and line up where it's going to cut, so that it cuts on the right side of the line, obviously. So you're left with what you want to be left with. So you might have to come around this side again and come and have a look in on here. Opening that toother and then sliding along the line and cutting right on that line. It's actually quite accurate. Sometimes you do need someone to help hold that piece while you're cutting it. But as you can see, we've cut here right along that pencil line. Okay, I'm 1 millimeter over there, which won't matter because I've left myself 5 mil gap at the top of the window. But come and have a look, we'll put this infill in. Is it going to fit? It might be just a little bit off because we'll cut it with the guillotine instead of a grinder. Maybe not quite as accurate, but it is fitting. Wow. So that's not a bad join there for the guillotine. Thanks for watching us put a fibro sheet in. I hope that helps you if you use cement sheet in your building project. Catch you guys next time.